Hey y'all. So I've decided to make some more videos pinpointing some certain concepts instead of y'all having to watch entire class recordings. But the one I'm going to focus on today is solving quadratic equations by factoring. And so this is going to use several of the different factoring techniques that we've learned in chapter 5. If there are some certain techniques you want to practice more on, I do have some individual videos on those different concepts. So here we go, solving quadratic equations by factoring. And these worksheets that I'm using are free at kudasoftware.com. So I did not make these up. I'm just simply using their resource. The first 4 problems here, even though we're under the section of solving by factoring, the first 4 are already factored for you. And so it requires that you understand the concept. And I'm just going to look at number 2. It requires you to understand the concept of factors. So a plus 1 is a factor and a plus 2 is a factor. And the idea here is if a plus 1 equals 0. I don't care what a plus 2 equals. I'm only focusing on the fact that a plus 1 equals 0. Well, if that's the case, then I have 0 times something, and 0 times anything gives me 0. On the same note, if a plus 2 equals 0, then I have 0 times something gives me the 0 that I'm looking for. And so because we are already factored, we don't have to factor. Then all I have to do is find out what values of a make this a true statement. So I'm going to take the first factor, a plus 1, set it equal to 0. And then I take the second factor, a plus 2, set it equal to 0. And then I solve each of these individual equations for a. And so I got to get a by itself over here. So that means I need to subtract 1 to get it to the other side of the equation, or to get it to go away on this side with the a. And so I'm left with a equals -1 here. And then the other one, I subtract 2 from both sides. So it goes away over here with the a's by itself, and I'm left with a equals -2. And so I'll show you what I'm talking about here. If a equals -1, I'm going to plug -1 in wherever I have an a. So I've got -1 plus 1 times -1 plus 2. And so right here, that is 0. And then this other one, -1 plus 2, is +1. And so 0 times 1 is 0 equals 0. That's what I'm looking for. And then if a equals -2, well, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to plug -2 in wherever I have an a. So -2 plus 1, -2 plus 2. Right here, -2 plus 1 is -1. -2 plus 2 is 0. -1 times 0 is 0. Good, checks out. So that's how you approach problems 1 through 4. Now I do want to say that on 1 through 4, I can go straight to setting each one of those factors equal to 0, because I already have a 0 on the right side of my equation. I have a 0 all by itself over there. If I would have had like 2 right here, then that would have required some other work. And I'm hoping, and I don't have one like that. So I'm gonna pause eventually and make a video where I have one that is like that. And you know what? Nothing's better than no time like the present. So I'm going to pause and I will be right back. Okay, so I found a couple of examples of what I was talking about. So in this example one, I have x minus 2 times x minus 3, all of that equals 6. So because this is not a 0, I cannot do this. I can't say x minus 2 equals 6 and x minus 3 equals 6. That is wrong. Don't do it. So in order to solve a quadratic equation, what we have to do is we need that right side equal to 0. We need 0 on one side. It doesn't absolutely have to be the right side. So what I need to do is I got to get this 6 across the equal sign. So I got to subtract it. But I'm just going to copy down my x minus 2, x minus 3, and now that is minus 6 equals 0. And so I've got to simplify this so that I can factor, because I can't do anything with this right now as far as solving for x. So I need to FOIL this thing out. So x times x is x squared, x times negative 3, negative 3x. And then I got to distribute that negative 2 with everything. So negative 2x plus 6, and now minus 6, bring that down. And then when I combine like terms, I have x squared minus 5x, and then positive 6 minus 6 is 0. So those go away. So this is my new quadratic equation that I'm working with. And now it's time to factor. And so the number one rule in factoring is look for that greatest common factor. And I do have one. Both terms have an x. So I'm going to factor an x out. And then what I have left when I take an x away from x squared is just x. And then what I'm left with when I take x away from negative 5x, I'm left with a 5. And now I have a factor times a factor, and both of those factors are prime, and I've got my 0 on one side. Now I can set each one of my factors equal to 0 and solve for x. So this one's done. I see that x equals 0. But then here, when I add that 5 to both sides, I get x equals 5. So I have my two solutions here. Example 2, again, I might have a factor times a factor on one side of my equal sign, but I don't have the 0 over here on the right. So I need to subtract that 8 from both sides to get my 0 on one side. And now I've got to do the same thing that I did in example 1. I've got to simplify this because I can't do anything with it as it sits. So I got to distribute that x to get 3x squared minus 2x minus 8. Okay. So now I have a quadratic that is in standard form here, and it's time for me to factor this. Looking at this, I don't have a greatest common factor, and since my leading coefficient is something other than 1, I've got to do this another way. And the way I'm going to show y'all in this video is using what's called the AC method. And I do have a whole video on that. So if you want to go back and watch me do this step by step a little slower, you can do that. So the AC method means I'm going to take A times C, and I'm going to find all my factors of 24. That have a difference of 2. And where I'm getting that from is this 8 is negative. So that means I'm going to take the difference of my factors. I'm going to have different signs on my factors. And those different signs mean that I subtract those factors to get 2. So 4 and 6 have a difference of 2. And the signs that I'm going to put on them are going to be minus and plus. Because that 2 is negative, I want my bigger factor to be negative. And so at this point, I'm gonna split up these 3 terms into 4 terms. But what I'm really splitting up is that negative 2x. I'm going to write that as negative 6x plus 4x, because that will give me that negative 2x. And then I'm going to bring these other terms down. Now that I have 4 terms, I can factor this by grouping. So I'm going to look at these first 2 terms. What is my greatest common factor of those first 2 terms? It's 3x. And then I'm going to write down what's left when I factor that 3x out of each one of those terms. So I'm taking a 3x out of this one, and I'm taking a 3x out of that one. I'm dividing each one of those terms by that greatest common factor to write what's left in here. So 3x squared divided by 3x is just x. And then 6x divided by 3x is 2. And then I bring that sign down. Then I'm going to bring this plus down. What is my greatest common factor of these 2 terms? Well, it's 4. So I'm going to take a 4 out of each one of these terms and write down what's left inside that set of parentheses. So 4x divided by 4 is 4. And negative 8 divided by 4 is negative 2. And so with grouping, the idea is that these 2 factors are the same. Because this is not completely factored. I still have more factoring to do because of this plus sign. And so now when I look at these 2 terms, that's a term, that's a term. What is my greatest common factor out of those 2? Well, the greatest common factor is that factor of x minus 2. That is my greatest common factor that I need to now factor out. So I'm going to pull that x minus 2 out in front, I'm factoring it out. And I'm going to write down what I have left when I divide that x minus 2 out of each one of those terms. So what I have left is 3x plus 4. Now I have this completely factored because I have an x minus 2 factor, I have a 3x minus 4 factor, and the operation between those is multiplication. I don't have a plus in between. So this is all just one term. It's written in factor form, in prime factor form. So now I'm going to take each one of those factors, set them equal to 0, and solve for x. And so here, negative 4, 3x equals negative 4. And then I'm going to come up here. I divide both sides by 3 to get x equals negative 4/3. So here are my 2 solutions to that equation. All right, let me get over here and do a couple of more. A couple more. I'll do number 5. I could have just done that one. I didn't have to go find examples, but it's okay. So number 5, I want to solve this by factoring. And the idea here is we have to have a 0 on one side. So I need to add this 5 to both sides. So I have my 0 over here. And then I'm going to simplify. I got to combine like terms. So 19 plus 5 is 24. Oopsies, let me write this way. Plus 11x x squared. So now I have my quadratic on one side, 0 on the other side, and now it's time to factor. And so the way we're going to factor this, because my leading coefficient is 1, I don't have a greatest common factor. I don't have an x in everything. My leading coefficient is 1. So now I can drop down to 2 sets of parentheses equals 0. Carry that equals 0 with you the whole time. And so what I'm going to look for, because that leading coefficient is 1, I can just drop down with an x and an x without even thinking about it. Then I need to know what signs am I going to put inside my parentheses. Well, I look right here at that 24 and it's positive. That means I have the same signs down here in my parentheses. This negative 11 tells me that those same signs are minus. And then I come over here and I write out all of my factors of 24. I don't care how confident you are in your factoring abilities. If you will write down all of your factors, eventually it's going to make your life easier, especially when you're new to factoring. If you've been factoring for a long time, and I say a long time, more than a semester, then just get in the habit of writing them all out. And so because my signs are the same down here inside my parentheses, I want to take the sum of my factors. I want to add my factors. So the sum of 1 and 24 is 25. Here I got 14. Here I got 11. And here I got 10. I want the factors that add up to 11. So that is 3 and 8. I just throw them in there. It doesn't matter what order you put them in when the signs are the same. Now that I've done that, now that I have prime factors equals 0, then I can set each one of those factors equal to 0 and solve for x. And those are my two solutions. Now, let's see, let's go do another one. Let's go with number 9. So again, I need to make sure my equation equals 0. I need 0 on one side. I don't have that going on for me, so I got to make it happen. I've got to subtract 6 from both sides. And here I have 6n squared minus 18n minus 24. Okay. So I have a quadratic equation. It equals 0. I have 0 on one side. And I want to get started on factoring. Now, the number one rule in factoring is look for greatest common factor. And I do have one. Here I have 6, 18, 24. My greatest common factor is 6. So I'm going to take that out. I'm going to factor a 6 out of each one of those terms. And then I'm going to write down what I have left when I do that. So I'm factoring a 6 out of 6n squared. I'm left with n squared. I'm factoring a 6 out of negative 18n. I'm left with negative 3n. I'm factoring a 6 out of negative 24. So I'm left with negative 4. Okay. Now it's time to solve. We're at a crossroads. We got a couple of directions we can go with this. I can go ahead and deal with this 6. Since it's just a number, it does not have a variable in it, I can divide both sides by 6 to get rid of it. And I can only do that because there's not a variable. If there was a variable, I would just have to leave it and carry it with me. But it's not important because it's just a number. It's not important when we're solving by factoring. It is important when we're just factoring. Okay, so now what I'm working with is n squared minus 3n minus 4 equals 0. And I want to factor this. Give myself a little more room. So I want to factor this. And so my leading coefficient is 1. I don't have a common factor. So I can go straight to my 2 sets of parentheses. And I can drop down with n and n. Now I want to know what signs am I going to put down here in my parentheses. And I'll look to that second sign in my quadratic. It is negative. So because it's minus, I'm going to have different signs down here in my parentheses. And then I'm going to write out all of my factors of 4. And because my signs down here in the parentheses are different, I'm going to take the difference of my factors. So the difference of 1 and 4 is 3. The difference of 2 and 2 is 0. I want the factors that have a difference of 3. 1 and 4 did that for me. And so since my signs are different, and this 3 is negative, then my bigger factor goes with the negative. And you can check yourself. You can look at this. I have a positive 1n. I have a negative 4n. And when I add those two together, I do get that negative 3n. So I know I have my sign in the right place, my signs in the right places. So I've got this all factored out. Each factor is prime. So I can now set each one of those equal to 0 and solve for n. And I have this one is n equals -1, and this one is n equals +4. So those are my two solutions for that one. Okay, so I think that's enough for now. Again, I got this worksheet on kudasoftware.com, and it looks like it's working from the Algebra 1 section of the worksheets. So practice those. They do provide all of the answers, so you can know if you got it right or wrong. I hope this video helped you. If you have any questions, holler at me. Y'all take care.